Welcome back into the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast with our number 2 hole hitter up next, Teddy Covers. Teddy, welcome in. How you feeling, man?
Hey, great to be here, Drew. I always like this show. It's a fun show to do. It's fast-paced. It's entertaining. It keeps me on my toes. And, one of the things that I've always done since I first moved to Vegas is the concept of going through every single game on the board, leave no stone unturned. And obviously, that's what we do here on this pod. Hopefully, we can give you guys a couple of betting tidbits that'll help you with your wagering on college football this weekend.
Well said, Teddy. At Teddy_covers. Check him out, Wager Talk and sportsmemo.com. He knows his college football. One of the best in the NFL and his track record in the NBA. Second to none here. So, guys, if you're new to the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, we are going through every single game on the board. We like to say go to Wager Talk, live odds screen, and those little numbers next to the team name. When you go to college football, we're just going right down in numerical order. This is part number 2. 349-350 Marshall James Madison down to 367-368 Colorado at Oregon State. So that's the section we're doing right now. Before we had mid-major Matt, and after this we'll have CT Bets and then Kelly Stewart to finish off the Every Game on the Board podcast. Next, first game up here for this section, 349-350 Marshall James Madison, 51 being the total. We're seeing JMU off of their first loss here, Teddy, -12 to -12.5, -11.5 out there as well. Marshall, JMU, what are you thinking here on Saturday?
I mean, James Madison's first loss was all about being sloppy with the football. They gained almost 700 yards in the ball game. They scored 38 points, but they committed 4 turnovers, and the defense didn't have a particularly good game against Georgia Southern. But that's certainly been the exception rather than the rule. We've seen that defense struggle on a couple of occasions on the highway. That has not been the case of playing at home. Marshall's a fascinating story right here. All right, this is a team that went into South Bend and beat Notre Dame. All right, beat them straight up as 20-point dogs. Now, I know Notre Dame isn't quite as good as many people thought they were going to be. There have been some growing pains. We saw them lose last week at home to Stanford. But part of that loss last week at Stanford, the fact their confidence got shattered when Marshall went in there and beat them early in the season. But since that win for the Thundering Herd, 4 games, and you want to talk about not sniffing a point spread cover, there were 17-point favorites against Bowling Green. They lost. They were 3.5-point favorites against Troy. They lost by multiple scores. They were 31-point home chalk against Weber. They weren't interested, or whoever the heck they played, FCS vote. And then Lafayette last week, off a bye, extra time to prepare. 10.5-point home chalk. They lose that game by double digits. This is a team whose offense is not working right now at all. Marshall's going to have to show me that we can bet on them before I look to bet on them, because when you fail to cover 4 straight games, all by double-digit margins, and you're facing a high-octane opponent who can put points up against just about anyone, yeah, Marshall's going to have to show me they can cover. I'm not buying in to that team right now. They're on a point spread free fall.
Teddy, I love the stats about Marshall. I'm with you too. I mean, after that Notre Dame, just losing each game after that, it's something I've noticed. I have a question for you just in terms of like concept and betting. I've heard a lot of guys talk about like the situation JMU is in this week where, you win all of your games, whatever they were, 6-0, 7-0, and then you lose that first one, that next game. Do you think that that's kind of a down spot? It depends on the team, or you don't think there's anything to that?
So if you're chasing a national championship, which James Madison was not doing,
right,
and you suffer a November loss, which means you're not going to get to the national championship game. Okay. Not in October. October losses, you can still get there. Late season losses, you can't. So when you're chasing a national championship game and you lose late, yeah, your season's done. And that's a team that you expect hangovers. You don't expect them to bounce right back immediately. James Madison wasn't thinking about winning a national championship. They weren't thinking about an undefeated season. Those weren't their goals coming into the campaign. So I would anticipate a team like James Madison would have less of a hangover off that first loss than some other squads with more lofty expectations.
Teddy Covers, ladies and gentlemen, our number 2 hole hitter here. And we got another 3:30 Eastern kick. Georgia Southern and ODU. That's Old Dominion, 351, 352, making our way down in rotation order. We got 65.5 being the total here, Teddy. Actually, a little trickle on the under. It opened 68. Now we're seeing 65.5. ODU, the Monarchs, minus 2.5-point home favorites. Georgia Southern, ODU here.
So you know me, I can't help myself. There's all these marquee games on last week, and I'm figuring all my attention's on this Coastal Carolina Old Dominion game because I was shocked at how Old Dominion was playing. Old Dominion blew that team off the field. All right, it's the best I've seen them play this year. I saw them beat Virginia Tech, and they look good there. I saw them battle with Virginia, but Virginia and Virginia Tech aren't any good this year. Last week they took a good team to the woodshed. In Coastal Carolina. They beat them up. There was nothing fraudulent about that win. They dominated the line of scrimmage. Their defense was all over it. The offense moved the ball up and down the field. This may well be, and again, you don't want to overreact to a single game, but that was a team that struggled early, underachieved early, even with the win over Virginia Tech. They were not thrilled. And again, they were dogs in all these games. Against East Carolina, they were dogs. Against Virginia and Virginia Tech, they were dogs. They were dogs against Liberty. They're not in situations now where they're stepping up in class in that same caliber. I think Old Dominion might well be bet on all the way. And if I'm going to play this game, it would be on the Monarchs. I think that's a team whose power rating number does not necessarily correlate with how good they are right now. And of course, we have common opponents for these two teams in Coastal Carolina. I'll give you a hint. Georgia Southern didn't beat them, let alone blow them out. Now, they do have some impressive wins this year. Obviously, James Madison last week, with the turnovers for the Monarchs that we just talked about. We saw them win at Nebraska earlier in the season. It's not like this team, has 23-point dogs. Not like they're hopeless. That's a good, it's a solid squad for Georgia Southern. But if you ask me which of these two teams right now is the undervalued commodity in the betting marketplace, it's Old Dominion. And that's a team that I may well ride this week. I think there's a lot of upside for the Monarchs moving forward.
Nice breakdown there, Teddy. Next game up, we're going 12 noon Eastern here, 353, 354. Syracuse and Clemson. One of the top games this weekend here, Teddy. 50 being the total, Clemson minus 13.5. And I'll say something about Syracuse here. Possibly, I was just breaking down this game with Ralph Michaels and Robbie Vino on the college football, Best Damn College Football Show, the Wager Talk YouTube channel. Syracuse might be the best Syracuse team since Donovan McNabb was taking snaps. But the one problem with this situation here, Teddy, they've done all of their heavy lifting at home, in the dome. They're in Syracuse. Their only road game at UConn. Now they're going on the road to Clemson, South Carolina. It doesn't get any more night and day than at UConn and then at Clemson here. So I don't know. That's a big factor here. Minus 13 in the hook for Clemson. You liking anything in the ACC?
The Donovan McNabb Syracuse teams will be favored by as much as Clemson's favored by in this game.
You think?
Okay. I think so. Not that Syracuse – look, we love Dino Babers, all right? We're glad Dino Babers kept his job. We think he's a good head coach. There's lots to like about Syracuse. Their defense has been outstanding. And this series history, look, last year, decided by a field goal between these two teams. In fact, 3 of the last 5 meetings, including a Syracuse outright upset, and they've all been in this range, where Syracuse has been a big dog. Most of them a bigger dog than this one, 20 plus 24, plus 24, plus 28. The one year they were plus 47.5. And then last year, 13.5 at it's not called the Carrier Dome anymore, the whatever dome they call it now, in Syracuse. But again, that was a 3-point game. Syracuse in it wire to wire. And of course, the recent meetings have the reason that they've been tight is because Syracuse defense has been able to shut down Clemson fairly well, with the exception of the one blowout in 2020, which was, the type of year that I'd really try to take all the stats from 20. Honestly, I take the stats from 2020 and the program in 2020, and most of that, I just chuck it in the garbage. That was a year that there was so much randomness around college football. It's easy for me to take those stats and say they didn't mean as much, or that year didn't matter that much. And I don't worry as much about the 2020 results as I do of any other year that things were normal. So the point is this: Syracuse defense has been able to hang with Clemson. They've done a nice job of shutting the Tigers down and keeping themselves in these games. But, and They moved the football last week against NC State, but even NC State was playing without their quarterback. And other than that, they haven't faced a whole lot. This is going to be a challenge for the Orange. It's not a game that I trust Syracuse to move the ball up and down the field. And Schrader in the offense, I mean, it's not an elite offense for Syracuse. They're pedestrian on the offensive side. Their success this year has come because the defense has been better than expected. So we have a defensive-minded series. We have a Clemson team that, again, they just faced, a Wake, a wild game, and NC State, a tough game, and, they had the blowout over BC, but last week against Florida State, another intense game. Was it an exhale spot, even against an undefeated team? I'm not convinced that Clemson brings their A game, and I don't love Clemson's offense to begin with, So, like 17-14 last year, this total sitting in the low 50s. We're going to come back to this game at the end. When you ask me what's my most confident play right now, I do not expect points in bunches in Clemson on Saturday. I'll just leave it at that.
I like it. Most confident play at the end, guys. We got 9:45 Eastern, 6:45 Pacific kick for our next game up, 355, 356, Utah State and Wyoming. We're going to Laramie, Wyoming here, guys. Highest elevation home field advantage in FBS football. However, Utah State, in Logan, Utah, they're top 10 anyway, so they're used to the elevation. Low total here, Teddy, 42 and a half, depending where you're shopping. Actually, even 43 and a half popping up, looking at the Wager Talk live odds screen. 4.5, that's Wyoming as the home favorite, hosting Utah State here, Teddy.
And I'll tell you flat out, I have no idea what to do with this game. Flat out. Wyoming's coming off a bye. Their offense hasn't really worked this season. You look at the numbers, they're ugly numbers. 304 against New Mexico, 253 total yards against San Jose, 278 against BYU, 342 against Air Force. FCS school, they got to 294 against. The only time this year they've gotten 200 yards passing was that crazy game against Tulsa where they had to rally from behind in the fourth quarter. I watched that game, and they kind of caught lightning in the bottle. It's not a good offense, but they've had that extra week to prepare, which Utah State has not had. Now, Utah State just pulled off, an upset over Air Force, and then last week they were trying to lay 2 touchdowns to Colorado State, and that offense isn't a lay 2 touchdowns kind of offense either, necessarily. Both these teams are feisty. All right, this game might be a whole lot of fun because these are two teams. I think they're both well coached. I think they're both high character squads. Last year, 44-0 Wyoming over Utah State. And, you say, is it the revenge factor or does this team have confidence? Well, I guess from a situational standpoint, Wyoming coming off the bye, maybe you look in their direction. But, I mean, really, this is not a game I'm going to play.
Teddy, next game up, 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific here. We get the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors on the mainland here, making the trip here to Colorado State. The Rams -5, 46.5 being the total. Two teams here. I don't know. Big question marks all over, Teddy. Low total, -5 in the hook. That's Colorado State at home.
How's Colorado State laying points to anybody?
That's what I'm wondering. I mean,
I understand they want to bet against Hawaii. Okay, I get it. And you want to bet against Hawaii on the mainland. I get that too. Although warm weather this week. One thing I was checking, you want to check that forecast? It was like temperatures in the 70s. It's a day game. It'll be all right for the Warriors situationally. And Colorado State, look, so far this season, they've scored 7, 19, 7, 10, 17, and 13. The last 2 coming against Mountain West competition and not elite Mountain West competition at that. All right. Total yardage, 262, 255, 253, 249, 246, 219. You can't lay points with this team. You sure can't lay more than a field goal with this team. So my choice going in, a priori, is Hawaii or pass. And look at Hawaii all of a sudden. Yeah, they had the ugly loss at New Mexico State. I get it, Since that time, they had a bye week, which you love for the first-year head coach like Timmy Chang. They hung tough with San Diego State, 24-point dogs. They lost by 2. And they beat up Nevada last time out as 6.5-point dogs. So Hawaii has shown me that they're improving, and they've shown me they can cover point spreads. I know I don't want the favorite in this one.
Teddy, you bring up New Mexico State, and actually New Mexico State got another win last week against New Mexico, which is our next team up here. 360-359 is the rotation number, 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. Fresno State at New Mexico. Lobos, tough times right now, Teddy covers. They're catching 10.5 at home, 40.5 being the total. Seeing anything here, Fresno State and New Mexico?
So I'll say this, it's tough times for New Mexico. Not like things are going great for Fresno this season. They did bounce back with a very surprising to me and in some ways impressive win at home against San Jose State. But again, the offense didn't work. This is a team whose quarterback is hurt. Hainer got hurt. Since Hainer got hurt, the offense hasn't worked. It really hasn't. Everything they're doing it's all dink and dunk. They don't run the football particularly well. But their defense has been okay. But again, you talk about a team that had that game against Oregon State. Remember, that was at week 2 of the season that they almost knocked off the Beavers. And then since that time, ugly against USC, ugly against Boise, certainly the second half of that ball game. They lose straight up at UConn. And last week they steal the win against San Diego State, but again, or San Jose State. But it was despite the offense, not because of the offense. So, it's certainly not a team that I'm particularly comfortable with laying double digits on the road. They don't score points like that. This is an anemic attack. And, you look at the other end of the spectrum, Rocky Long's defense, all of a sudden, and look, New Mexico is not going to be a juggernaut in any stretch of the word. They've lost each of their last 4 ball games since that UTEP upset, and the offense, 0, 20, 14, and 9. They ain't scoring points. This is not a team that's going to march up and down the field. But one thing we look for, all right, with the bad teams that can't move the football, how's the defense holding up? And the defense isn't letting go of the rope for New Mexico, not in any game thus far. Maybe the LSU game a little bit. But we have a defensive coach who we respect catching double digits from a favorite that we don't respect. Look, I don't know if I'm actually going to put any money on New Mexico here, but I know I ain't playing Fresno.
Like the breakdown, Teddy. And yeah, just a 40.5 as the total. It's a low total in college football, but tough to see a lot of points in that one. We got next game up, San Jose State and New Mexico State here. 361, 362. We're making our way down in rotation order with Teddy covers, 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific kick here. 3 touchdown favorite and then some. That's San Jose State on the road, minus 21.5, minus 22 starting to pop up as well, Teddy. 43 being the total. So we get a 3 touchdown favorite with a 43 as the total. Las Cruces, New Mexico. Anything here, Teddy?
Well, we get to talk about Rocky Long and we get to talk about Jerry Kill. Again, I've been in Vegas a long time. And some of these coaches, as they cycle through different programs over the years, they absolutely attract your attention. And we're talking about 2 old guys, both of whom can coach up teams. Kill has a remarkable track record, really does, over a very long period of time that I've been nothing but impressed with. That being said, because you got the guys that you love, but that doesn't mean that you want to be betting on them every single week or even close. And San Jose is on the other end of that bad game last week against Fresno with a defense that really didn't an offense that didn't get the job done in that ball game at all. And now they're going against another defense. It's finding ways to make plays, not from a talent standpoint necessarily, but executionally. Look, they've been solid. And of course, again, they had the bad loss to Florida International, which is embarrassing, and they had the game against Wisconsin where they just, the Badgers were going to be able to do whatever they wanted at the line of scrimmage. But these aren't mismatched games at the line of scrimmage necessarily for New Mexico State. And this isn't all right, hold your nose and see what you can do, and maybe they'll get there. In my mind, it's a little bit of the wrong price range for San Jose. We've seen that defense shut teams down, like, the Western Michigan game, the UNLV game, even Fresno last week. But offensively, they're not a team I really want to lay this price with against a well-coached defense.
Agreed, Teddy. Guys, check out Teddy Covers, Wager Talk, and Sports Memo sportsmemo.com, as we got a couple games left in this section. Teddy's 17-8, 68% in the NFL, and his 5% big ticket plays, 45-20, 69% going all the way back since May. Guys, overall NBA as well, NBA season, if you like betting hoops, 63-26, 71% since February of last year. So check them out. Teddy covers Wager Talk, sportsmemo.com. Let's head to the MAC here. A little MACtion, Teddy. 363, 364, 2 o'clock Eastern Michigan at Ball State. 58.5 being the total. Ball State -2.5 point home favorites in Muncie, Indiana.
So the technicals really point towards the Eastern Michigan Eagles here. They've been great road as a MAC road dog since 2015. We're talking about a 15-3 point spread record. They really have been good in this role. We saw them blow out Western Michigan earlier this year in that road dog role. So, the Eagles, we like them better outside of Ypsilanti than in Ypsilanti, and that is the case this week. But, and I'm kidding. Look, last week was one of the more frustrating weeks that I'm going to have in college football. Can't win a close game, and the short list was good, and yet the client plays weren't. And one of the games I had on the short list last week was Northern Illinois against Eastern Michigan, and I didn't use it for the clients. I didn't bet it, and I was frustrated. But we have a read on Eastern Michigan, okay? When Eastern Michigan plays a physical team that can run the football at the line of scrimmage, they cannot hang around. When they play a team with significant skill position talent on the outside, they cannot hang around. They're not going to get stops against the better offenses that they face. They'll get bullied by the better running games, and all they do is play zone defense. The playmakers are going to be able to find holes in that defense and move the football up and down the field against the Eagles defense. We saw it in the Buffalo game. We saw it in the Northern Illinois game. It's very clear that's the MO of that team. Problem is what is Ball State? Because Ball State doesn't fit into that category, but they kind of do and they kind of don't. They're an emerging squad. It's like I have a better sense of exactly who Eastern Michigan is right now than exactly who Ball State is, but they're certainly showing signs of being a team that we want to be paying attention to in the MAC this season. Again, 3 straight wins. They beat the Northern Illinois team that Eastern Michigan got annihilated by. They won at Central Michigan as a dog. And of course, last week against UConn, they managed to win the game and never sniffed the point spread cover in that one. But I don't worry as much about the out-of-conference matchups in a conference in the middle of conference season when a team doesn't perform. But the wins against UConn, against Central, it's not like this is an offense that's marching the ball up and down the field. It's not. I don't see them as that dynamic. So that tells us that maybe, the thought process here is Eastern Michigan is not facing that type of team, and we do like them as road dogs. Maybe look at the Eagles. Good game. Really is a fascinating game, and I know they spend so much time. Oh, who's Alabama playing this week? This is a great college football game, an interesting college football game, a bettable college football game. I don't mind talking about games like this. They get no hype elsewhere.
No, and I love the analysis too, Teddy. I mean, your EMU analysis, I know I wrote it down there. That's what I'm going to be looking for. And the matchup analysis, guys, just the second one Teddy was saying, that in my opinion, that's kind of the best way to win sidewise. Like, where does a team struggle with? Does the team they're playing fit those categories? Whenever I've had, sustained success in college football, I like to kind of concentrate on that type of stuff. So good stuff from Teddy Covers. As always, just 2 games left here, guys. 365, 366. UNLV at Notre Dame, 48 being the total, -26.5. That's the Fighting Irish against the Running Rebels here. 2:30 Eastern kick, Teddy. Anything Notre Dame, UNLV?
So I don't know if Brumfield's going to play for the Rebels. And their quarterback, their starting QB.
Yeah.
And he's missed the last couple of weeks, and it's been ugly. Okay. This is an offense that scored, 52? They had 14 against Cal. But Cal's got a real good, that's more than Colorado had in regulation last week. They scored 58 against North Texas, scored 34 against Utah State on the road. They beat up New Mexico and hung 31 on them. And then the last 2 weeks without Brumfield, they scored 7-7 against Air Force and San Jose State. 213 yards in the one game, 179 yards in the other game, both times outgained by 220 plus. I don't want UNLV without their quarterback this week, okay, especially against a Notre Dame team that let's say I'm not convinced they come in with a chip on their shoulder, but they certainly have something to prove off the bad loss to Stanford last week as significant favor with a 16.5-point chalk in that ball game. We've seen, I was like, oh, Notre Dame can't move the football. They moved the football against BYU up and down the field. They moved the football against North Carolina up and down the field. It's not like this offense can't move the ball. They had a bad game last week. In theory, they're supposed to bounce back here. But at the same time, when you start looking at the Irish schedule, let me grab it real quick. You start looking at the Irish schedule.
It's always
easier. It's easier for me to find the paper version than to start clicking and clicking. I'm looking at past results, and I have to click over to further. After this, they got undefeated Syracuse right now, and then Clemson. And they have the rivalry game against Navy. They got Boston College they play every year and USC to close out the campaign. This is the most meaningless game on their schedule by a wide margin, maybe for the whole season. So I don't know that winning by margin is going to be the MO here for Notre Dame. If I took the Irish, I might take them first half as opposed to full game. But with anything, you got to know if UNLV's good. The difference between the Rebels' offense when Brumfield's in and out is night and day. This is a quarterback injury that you want to pay attention to between now and kickoff because there's a chance he may be back on the field.
Yeah, this is one of those that, most valuable to the point spread when a quarterback like Brumfield, when a team does well with him and isn't, nearly the same without him. That is kind of one of the more important, situations to the spread. Teddy, just a question for you, because trying to get out in front of that, because that's going to be moving the line if they announce Brumfield is playing or if he's not. What do you think about, just kind of handicapping this as he's not playing? I mean, when you look at UNLV, they're 4-3. Their goal is to make a bowl game. This is a program that hasn't been to a bowl in I can't tell you how long, till that North Texas bowl game. That had to be more than 5 years ago, Teddy. So that's their goal. And when you look at their schedule, Notre Dame, San Diego State, Fresno State, Hawaii, and Nevada, there are a couple winnable games there. Why would you play them against Notre Dame? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't you wait until it's actually, a more likely winnable game than at Notre Dame on the road? I don't think he's going to play. What do you say to that?
So I don't disagree with that in theory. At the same time, if your QB is healthy, you're not going to say, well, you'll be healthier next week. Your QB's healthy, you put him out there. Okay. Especially because they've scored 7 points in back-to-back weeks against much weaker defense than the one they're going to play. If he's not out there, it could get ugly. So, you can't it's not an easy scenario for a coach to tell a kid who's ready to play, no, sit down this week, we'll get you next week. It's not easy to even tell the team that either. Not without collusion from the doctors.
All right, guys, one game left. We'll get most confident play as well. 367-368, Colorado, Oregon State, minus 23.5. That's the Beavers at home. Speaking volumes here towards this Colorado program right now, Teddy, 48.5 being the total. Couple games with low totals, high spreads. That's always tricky for me. 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific kick here. You like it anything in the Conference of Champions to end it here, Teddy?
Jesus, boy, this number's high. I was hoping the number would be a little bit lower. Colorado State punked this team last year as 11.5-point dogs, 37-34 in overtime. In fact, the meeting before went to overtime, and the meeting before that was decided by a field goal. So it's not like this is a serious history where we're looking at a lot of teams winning by 4 scores, which is what Oregon State's going to have to do to cover this point spread. But from all indications, they are interested in this contest. They remember what happened last year. They're coming off a nice, back-to-back win. The win against Stanford that they stole at the end, and then the win against Washington State last week where they, the defense didn't really control the flow of that contest. I like this Beavers team. I do. But so do the markets. And I'm telling you, if all you've done is bet on the teams that fired their coaches in every game since they fired their coaches, you made money. A bunch of money in college football this year, one after the next, and Colorado the latest, 15.5-point dogs last week against Cal. and they win the game straight up. First game under interim head coach Mike Sanford Jr., who we know here in Las Vegas. His dad used to coach the UNLV squad, and I was never that much impressed with him, to be perfectly honest. Or the son, who was the offense coordinator for that team for many years, but now he gets the job at Colorado. And of course, the offense didn't do anything last week, but Cal's offense can't do anything either. Oregon State's offense can. And I don't think they're going to look past Colorado, and they might smack this team. But again, the price tag here, no bargains here on the Oregon State side, unfortunately. So that's probably going to leave me on the sidelines for this one in a game that may well be one-sided.
Teddy covers at Teddy_covers on Twitter. Check him out, wagertalksportsmemo.com. 68% in the NFL since week 1, 5% big ticket plays, 45 and 20, 69% since May of 2021. And in the NBA, he's 63 and 26, 71% since February of last year. So check him out. Knows his NFL, knows his NBA, baseball playoffs as well. So, Teddy, great stuff as always. Any final thoughts for the show before we shut this down? And do you have a most confident play of the slate?
Yeah, so final thoughts. I want you to come. I want to come on the show next week and have you bragging about my college football. Because September was great, and October has not been great, and I'm not happy about it. And it's not like I'm not doing the work or putting the time in. The results have been very frustrating. Games decided by a touchdown or less ATS. I'm 1-9 since week 1. And, you have to win some of those close games, and I just haven't done it. And as a handicapper, we're supposed to be able to say, hey, there's a couple extra points value here. So when I go 1-9 in games decided by a touchdown or less than a touchdown, I should say, ATS, it's really frustrating. We've had plenty of right sides, but I'm just not winning any of the close ones. So next week, let's talk about the nice weekend I had in college football this week. That's my goal. When it comes to most confident play, look, let's talk Syracuse Clemson. I said it earlier. I don't know where the points come from in this one. I do not trust the Syracuse offense to move the football against the Tigers defense. I would expect everything Syracuse is going to do is dink and dunk. Clemson's shown some additional downfield passing ability in recent weeks. And if this game does go over, it's going to be because Clemson scores 40-something, not because Syracuse gets in the 20s or 30s here. But I don't know that Clemson scores 40-something in this one. And I've been very impressed with the Orange defense from day one this season. So putting it all together, look at Syracuse and Clemson. You can still find 50s out there.
Yeah.
Under 50 for the Orange and the Tigers. That is a 9 a.m. kickoff here in Las Vegas.
Good stuff from Teddy Covers, as always, under 50, Syracuse and Clemson. Check them out on Twitter at Teddy_covers right here on the Every Game on the Board podcast Wednesdays. Moving forward, it's already week 8, Teddy, but great stuff as always, guys. We will be right back with Chris Thurston in part number 3 of the Every Game on the Board podcast. Smash that like button. We'll be right back.